river journey, roll, roll, river journey, take me where you're bound to go. Roll, river journey, roll, river journey, roll, roll, river journey, take me where you're bound to go. Calling you on a journey, rambling river Mississippi.
The raft was built in modules because it had to be disassembled to transport and be reassembled at the Minnesota River under the Mendota Bridge. The tar paper shack across the alley from our house belonged to Mr. Nelson. I always found it fascinating to talk with older folks and find out what they did during their life. There was no instruction manual for the raft, but somehow we managed to get it put back together. The Idleness 8 was ready.
Roll, river journey, roll, I'm telling you, roll, river journey. Roll, river journey, roll, roll, river journey. Take me where you're bound to go. Take me where you're bound to go. Take me where you're bound to go.
A reporter and a film crew from WCCO TV showed up for the launch and took some footage.
Song, read about her in a book. Go down to the riverbank yourself and take a look. Go down, take a look at that river. Go down, I'll introduce you to her big river, Mississippi.
There are 27 locks and dams along the length of the Mississippi River. They each create long pools of deeper water that allows for river transportation and flood control. We locked through 8 of them during our voyage down the river.
I'll introduce you to her big river, Mississippi. Surely is a friend of mine. Big river, Mississippi, I found my home. Graceful as a dancer when I wake up in the morning. She's my longtime pal. It's true, we met the same way. I'm telling you, if you can't see her even driving slow, pull over and park, go down and say hello. Go down, take a look at that river. Go down, I'll introduce you to her big river, Mississippi. Surely is a friend of mine, friend of mine.
The cabin of the Raft had many features such as panoramic clear vinyl windows that could drop down, a kitchen countertop with a drawer and a sink. 2 hinged doors could be lowered from the sidewalls for tables or bunks. There were ship steering wheels, one inside and one on the roof, that were pulleyed to the outboard motor. There was a hole in the floor of the cabin for obvious reasons, and a ladder that led to the roof.
Big River, Mississippi, surely is a friend of mine.
Locking through a dam sometimes took a while, as we had to wait for tugs and barges. While in one lock, Gary spied a snake swimming near the raft and put his hand in the water and waved it. The snake promptly swam over and bit him. We asked the lockmaster if it was poisonous, and he said, "Just keep an eye on Gary for a while and don't let him fall asleep."
Rising tide on high water, get yourself down to the river wide. There's high water coming on the rising tide. Miles an hour rolling in flood, making miles a day over muscle and blood. Tears and sweat can only provide higher water for the rising tide. Rising tide on high water, rising tide on the riverside. Rising tide on high water, get yourself down to the river wide. There's high water coming on the rising tide. There's high water coming on the rising tide. You can't stop her, no, no, rising up on her own, running hard
Passing the landmark Chimney Rock.
on the rising tide.
I would fall asleep while fishing, so Dad tied a rope on my life jacket so I wouldn't roll off the raft. Here we are at Wabasha, Minnesota. We're getting ready to go to a movie that night.
On the rising tide. On the rising tide. River, river, changing plans, rising to reclaim her lands and taking history for a ride on the high water on the rising tide. Rising tide on high water, rising tide on the riverside. Rising tide on high water, get yourself down to the river wide. There's high water coming on the rising tide. There's high water coming on the rising.
One day, we were tied up along the shoreline, and Dad walked into a town to get gas. Gary and I were playing cards when a loud thump broke the silence. I looked out, and a teenager was throwing rocks at the raft. I shouted, "Stop!" and he continued throwing rocks. I jumped in knee-deep water, waded ashore, and the kid hit me in the nose and left. When Dad got back, he took this picture. During the voyage, we passed through 7 lock and dam systems, numbers 2 through 8. A storm blew in fast as we were approaching a dam. We had to use both motors to steer ashore and tie up. The cabin on the raft acted like a big sail, and the wind was going to blow us over the dam. Chores had to be done, and we had the luxury of a built-in sink. Imagine that. We used river charts and river buoys to avoid sandbars and deadheads. As I look back now, some 65 years later, I feel this was an adventure to share. We all have adventures, so I'm sharing this one. The Idleness 8 was impaled. As we approached our final destination, Lansing, Iowa, we were having a lunch of hot dogs and beans at the back of the raft. The raft struck a large river buoy. It bobbed down, and then it bobbed up, breaking through floorboards. We were stuck on it. We waved to some boats near shore, and several came out to the raft. Dad went to shore and made some phone calls. When he returned, he said several friends were driving to Lansing to pick us up, and that some fellow had bought the Idleness 8 for $50. In the fall of 1956, I was in 5th grade at Oakwood Elementary School. I took the WCCO film to school, and it was shown at an assembly in the gym.